Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Food Enthusiast. I'm Dara Bunjon, PR maven, author, food stylist, and frustrated baker. Today's guest is Jane Marion, the food and dining editor of Baltimore Magazine, a job she has held for over 7 years. A graduate of Columbia School of Journalism, former entertainment editor of TV Guide, columnist for the Philadelphia Magazine and Entertainment Weekly. Jane, we are excited to have you here, and I want to address something right up front about the elephant in the room, about the coronavirus and how that's going to be affecting things, but we're going to talk about that later in the show because there's so much more to talk about today. Being a restaurant reviewer, I know that people come up to you and say, "Oh, what a cush job.
Yes.
You know, aren't you lucky?" And Baltimore Magazine, I don't know if people will be able to see it. We're going to hold it like this, and if it shows, it shows. The March issue is the best restaurants.
I'll hold it.
There you go. Baltimore issue, the best restaurants, is out on the stands now. And I know that's not an easy job. You might have picked 50 restaurants. It took a team to put this together. Can you tell us more about your team and how long it took?
Yeah. People do say it's a cush job, and I'm not going to lie. It kind of is. It's a total privilege to be able to eat out, have the magazine pay for it, and get to go out so much. But it is a lot of work, as it should be. I take it very seriously. We go to each and every restaurant on this list, usually once, sometimes twice. It's a process that I like to say, you know, I'm eating out so much all the time that it's just an ongoing process, but I start in earnest in August. I'm always thinking what can be a best restaurant. So we put together a list. We sort of have a war room. I and my team kind of throw everything at the list. Sometimes we end up with 120 spots, even though we know we're going to cull it down to 50, and we can't possibly eat at the 120 because of budget and time. But we'll start with a big number, and we'll just sort of have conversations about some of the spots on the list, and then we winnow it down. We figure out where we're going to eat, and we're eating pretty much up until press time in January. So August through January, we're eating, we're note taking, we're photographing.
So you've gone back to all these restaurants from August through to publication.
Yes, and year after year. I mean, you know, prime rib. I don't think we've ever missed a year with prime rib. I could be wrong.
Who would pass up a meal at the prime rib anyhow?
Right. And sadly, Buzz Beeler just died, the owner.
May he rest.
Yeah, so R.I.P. But hopefully the spirit of the spot won't change. But we go everywhere on this list. We take notes. I can talk more about that if you're interested about what we're looking for.
Well, we can hit this now. So let's talk about it. What boxes do these restaurants need to tick to make this list?
Yes. So prior to me coming on board, my predecessor, who was wonderful, Suzanne Loudermilk, I don't know if she had a physical list. I know she had things that she thought about. I have a young team of writers. I wanted to make sure we were all speaking the same vocabulary. I wanted to make sure that we were all looking for the same things. Because I might go somewhere and love it, and you might go somewhere and hate it, because taste really is subjective. So
I agree wholeheartedly.
Food, in the food category, of course, there's a little bit of that as taste, but it might be presentation. It might be where was the food sourced. Under service, it's not just was the waiter good. It might be what's the mission of the restaurant, and how well did that server, I said waiter, how well did that server communicate the mission of the menu? It might be timing between courses. It might be asking the server for a recommendation. I once had an experience, I'll say where it was because I wrote about it. It was at Alexander Brown. 6 weeks in, I try not to draw too much attention to myself by asking too many questions. I'm sure you have this too. And I'll ask one or two questions, and then I'll have my dining companion, I'll say, can you ask about this? But I had only asked one or two questions. And one of them was, what do you recommend? What are your favorite entrees? And she said, I don't know what you want from me. And I thought, wow, that's pretty bad. I just want a recommendation. Right. Every server should have a recommendation. Yeah, so food, service, decor, Under decor, it might be things you don't think about, but I hate stained menus. I'm not talking about a pizza joint. I'm talking about a meal that's going to cost $100 or more.
Agreed.
If they're flowers, are they fresh? Are the bathrooms clean? I interviewed Gordon Ramsay several years ago when he opened up in Horseshoe, and he said he knows within 2 minutes whether it's a place is any good. And I said, well, what are your criteria? He said, the host, is the host warm and welcoming? That
Right.
person is the ambassador to the restaurant. So I think about that as well. The lighting, which lighting's become a big thing because of Instagram and social media. Everybody wants a pretty picture of food. Edison bulbs have gone the way of the dodo because they emit a really bad yellow light. But lighting, is the place too bright? Is the place too dark?
There's actually, I'm going to interrupt you. There
yeah.
was, what was it, Milan many years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, where fashion meets food.
Yes.
And it was a number of the early day influencers, the bloggers. There
Yeah.
wasn't any Instagram in that day.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in, and the place was so dark.
Yeah.
We pulled out our phones to light the menu.
To see the menu.
And then I had to address it when I was writing it up. And I went, how do I do this? I said, if you want someplace really dark and romantic. And putting the spin on it. But, lighting,
You should be able to see the menu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to be pulling it out. I do like many of the finer restaurants have readers for you.
Yes, they do. I love that. And a flashlight sometimes.
Right.
They'll break out a flashlight. Although we're talking about basic needs here. I'm not eating out to be tortured. Noise level, and sometimes it is torture. Have you ever had the experience where you go somewhere and you just have this instinct and it could just be the menus don't come out for like a half an hour and you have the urge to flee, but you don't. And 3 hours later, you've been a hostage at the table. You're like, I should have followed that instinct. And I had that recently, actually, when I was traveling in Europe. I was in France, and we just sort of jumped into a place, and I just had a really bad feeling. The waters had already come, the menus had come, and I said to my husband and daughter, we're leaving. And they said, we can't do that. I said, yes, we can. I'm 57 now. I'm not going to be tortured at the table.
It's funny, as we mature as women, I'm not putting up with this.
Yeah.
I don't need to be accepted.
Exactly.
I am who I am, as Popeye would say.
Yeah.
One of the things, one of my pet peeves is having hot food on a cold plate.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And cold food on a hot plate.
Yes.
It's so that's one of the things that I used to do restaurant shops years ago, and the timing and things like that. But that was my pet peeve.
Yeah. Or expecting a dish to be warm the way that it's described and then it's cold, or conversely, where that's just not communicated on the menu. Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was very interesting about this issue, the best restaurants, you have to do this every year. And I noted that your theme this time was the place to go for a chicken sandwich, or the place to go for this. Mm-hmm. It has to be tough.
Yeah. Well, this year, the place to, to go to feel sexy and get flaming saganaki or something to that effect. Uzobe.
Yeah.
That idea came from the idea that, when you're eating out, you don't always, sometimes you want a quiet romantic meal. Sometimes you want to eat at a bar by yourself. Sometimes you want great sushi. So we specifically targeted where you should go for what reason.
Specific reason.
But 7 years in, I feel every year I owe it to the reader not to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but to come up with a fresh concept. And right now I'm thinking about next year, which starts in August for me, for 2021 Best Restaurants. I read a lot. I'm a magazine. You use the word maven. I know this is Jay Moore's. I love the word maven. It's a great word. I'm a magazine maven / addict. I go to the airport. I love BWI because they have great magazine selection, but it's almost embarrassing. I almost always have most of the magazines in one section of the newsstand. Oh. I read a lot. I watch Food Network. I listen to NPR. I get inspiration absolutely everywhere. I can't even tell you where it comes
Maybe from the Food Enthusiast. You never know.
I'm just reading and looking and observing from year to year. But the one thing that has been kind of a constant is I've noticed people really want to know the chefs. They want to know their stories because, the food is only so interesting after a while. I mean, it's good or it's not. It tastes great or it doesn't.
How many chicken wings can you eat in different ways?
Right. But I'm really interested in, for instance, the Helmand, the story of the Carzets and how they, came to open a restaurant in America, and the fact that they've only had 3 chefs in 30 years and that not a recipe is written down. Is really remarkable, and that the owner's brother is the former president of Afghanistan, and they're right here in Baltimore. I'm more interested in hearing the story of Ashish Alfred, the chef at Duck Duck Goose, who overcame incredible. There's sort of levels of drug addiction. I mean, he himself doesn't know how he's alive. He had a very strong mother who basically dragged him by the neck to rehab. That doesn't always work. And now he's really leading the way in Baltimore. He's just came up with he's having sober brunches, I think once a month. Don't quote me on this. He's having sober dinners on Friday. He was invited to the James Beard house to do, a 9-course meal with, he doesn't like the word mocktails, but I'll use it. First ever, dry meal at the James Beard house since their existence. That's really amazing. That's more interesting to me than his duck dishes, which are delicious.
Well, he's gotten a lot of recognition. He really started over in D.C., and we were lucky enough that he came to Baltimore and opened up down in Fells Point. What got you into food? Is your mother a great cook?
Yes. My mom was a really good cook. She's still alive. She's 88. She doesn't cook much anymore. She came, she was a 50s housewife, and she, I give her so much credit because that was sort of the microwave, TV dinner. TV dinners were a treat. Once a year we went to McDonald's. That was such a treat.
That was your big dinner?
That was my big well, no, it wasn't. No, my parents gave me a lot of exposure at fine dining spots really all over the world. I went to Maxime's in Paris when I was 16 and Paul Bocuse on a trip to Europe. I was very lucky.
No wonder.
They gave me a lot of great exposure. But no, my mother really was sort of into health food before that was a word. We always had fresh fruits and vegetables. In the fridge, huge bowl of fruit on the kitchen table at all times. She was a little bit of a Jewish cook, I guess. She did the standards, the briskets, the roasted chickens. But what she did really well. I don't know if I appreciated it. I wasn't actually that much of an eater when I was growing up. I did a lot of ballet, and I had to stay a certain trim way. And but the way that I got into writing about food is that I worked at TV Guide, as you said, and I was the youngest editor there. I was 23. I was the second female that they'd ever had.
I'd give you a high five. But
yeah, it was pretty awesome. I don't know if I realized I was sort of groundbreaking. But what they did was they gave me the soap opera column, the horoscope column, and the cooking column to edit. And eventually I took over the cooking column because I really enjoyed it. So it was called Celebrity Dish, and it was before the Food Network. It ran for about 15 years, into the years after the Food Network came about. And I'd interview celebrities about their lives and about cooking and food, and they often didn't eat, so we would just, they did eat. They often didn't cook, so we'd talk about what they liked to eat, childhood memories of cooking. And I got amazing people. I had Sophia Loren on the phone once. She had a cookbook, and Duchess of York had a cookbook. Richard Simmons. I still remember some of the recipes they gave me.
Well, Richard Simmons must have been a hoot.
He was. I interviewed him on more than one occasion, always tied to something that he had to sell, which, exercise videos. Jane Fonda, big names. And so they would give me a recipe or I would give them one, and then I had to test the recipe. And that's really how I learned to cook, because recipe writing, as you know, it's like writing a computer program, and it begins with, preheating the oven,
and listing the items as they're used and in portion size.
Precisely.
Right.
And not just, take out a pot, a medium-sized pot, or, whatever the case is. So I really learned how to cook from that. I found that the food, just working with food and writing about food, was fun. I've always been creative. And so that was really my start. I did that for 15 years. And when the magazine hired, prior to becoming a food editor, I did a lot of writing for Suzanne Loudermilk. Lots of big service packages. She'd say, "Can you go eat here and write about this?"
Now, you're a Philly girl, right?
I am.
We were talking earlier. For those who didn't know my past, I used to cut school and go to Philly. With girlfriends. We go to the high schools that they used to go to because they had moved to Baltimore.
I love that you went to high school.
I went to school
you
that
weren't
day.
Really
I
that
wasn't
bad.
lying to my
you
mother.
Really weren't that bad.
No, not at all. And my days, way back in the days of yore, when I worked in Atlantic City, summer of '68, the boardwalk was the Taylor pork rolls. But there are a lot of different foods. Any memories that you have?
Yeah, Philadelphians go to the shore, as we call it. Yes, and still, we had a home there, so I went there a lot. I loved Core Brothers, custard. We had our equivalent of Fisher's popcorn, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the place, but big popcorn place that's still there. The saltwater taffy, James Saltwater Taffy, really wonderful lemonade stand, incredible pizza, mostly junk food.
Right, but it was, sadly to say that about 4 years ago, I went up to Atlantic City. A friend lived down in Margate, and I went on the boardwalk, and I went, this is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Talking about Taylor pork roll, we have a Philadelphia-oriented restaurant coming, Tony Luke's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's coming to Horseshoe Casino. I think it's already open. And so you can get your Philly cheesesteaks there. And they're doing a pork sandwich there.
Well, we should go together and see.
Okay, let's do that.
It's sort of like now that I consider myself a Marylander. It's been 21 years, and I write about crab. I love crab. Maybe more than lobster, more than cheesesteaks.
Okay.
I was a cheesesteak expert. Now I'm a crab cake expert. So I will not eat crab outside of Maryland, ever. And I will not eat a cheesesteak outside of Philadelphia, ever. So I am curious. Maybe I'll make an exception. I know the difference. So we'll see.
Well, we should go.
Let's do it together.
We can do like a live on our own personal Facebook page and put that out there.
I'm a Jim's fan. I used to live near South Street. Jim's is one of the iconic places to go. You wait in the line. The guy is kind of sweating over the meat. It's all chopped. You get whiz. He has like a slab, like an MAB, like a paint slab, that he slathers the cheese on.
Like a pallet?
A pallet, right. The wood, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of paints the whiz on, and, you get in line, you say whiz, and that's how you know you're from Philly. If someone stumbles and says, I'll have the cheesesteak with cheese, whiz, they're not from Philly.
Well, I remember in Atlantic City, the sub rolls we get here in Baltimore are really crummy.
Yes.
They are crummy.
Starts with the roll.
Starts with the roll. And that, Atlantic City.
White House.
The White House, yeah.
Yeah.
I've gone there. I see Jeffrey is here. He's saying cheese is not supposed to be whiz. Crab cakes in Maryland. Crab question from William Sample. What are acceptable fillers in your opinion? I hate veggies in my crab cakes except for a little chive.
I agree with you. Yeah, so I actually, when I make crab cakes myself, I use a recipe that I was given by Montel Williams, who used to have a talk show. His dad was fire chief in Baltimore.
Didn't you do a video on it?
I did, yes. Yeah, I made them on camera. It was nerve-wracking, but yes. And no vegetables. I couldn't agree more. I use saltines. That's pretty much it. Saltines, eggs, a little bit of Worcestershire, if I'm saying that correctly. I use Grey Poupon mustard. The trick to making crab cakes is to have them cold. You have to make them the day before. They fall apart when you fry them. If you bake them, they're a little more forgiving. But yeah, I agree with you. There are a number of places around town that serve them with some weird ingredients like leeks and beets. I'm not so much of a fan.
No. I think your Susan Levine is on, and she's saying, so fun, love this. Wash your hands
Susan.
in our sparkling bathrooms. This is Citrons. I was going to mention you that, there. I had it down here. Susan.
Hats off.
Yeah, she. You will. Jane will attest to that. That we're going to come back into this. So stay tuned, Susan, and we'll get to what you're doing over at Citron. Let me look. We were talking. Old day reviews was they went in disguises.
Yes.
They had the wigs, they had the hats, and things like that, and things have changed.
Yes, they have.
So I know I learned because a friend of mine was working in the kitchen in Magdalena, and she says, by the way, she says, I was in the kitchen and I saw your picture in the kitchen.
Your picture?
My picture.
Yeah, mine too. Mine's next to yours. They had my intern, who is no longer, she's now our digital editor, Lauren Cohen, had been working, as an intern from Towson for about 6 weeks when they had her picture there. Next to Ruth Reichel, of all people, who was the disguised queen.
Right. She and who's the one in New York who still writes?
Not Pete Wells?
No. Woman. She wore a big hat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah.
Someone can tell us.
Yeah. Pop in here. So I was telling you a couple stories, and I'll tell the audience that in its day, I think, had Cindy Wolf known this, she probably would have died when she opened Savannah Restaurant way before Charleston. I went in as a guest with Cynthia Glover, who was then the food editor for Baltimore Magazine.
Who still writes for me. Mm-hmm.
And I think Diane Neese was with us, and we're going in to do the review. And the table next to us was Elizabeth Large from the Sun Papers with Donna Carvella. And that she was being reviewed by that night by the two major restaurant reviewers in the city. I think she probably would have taken gas had she really known.
I don't know. She's very unflappable. Right. I don't know if she would have, but
well, maybe if she's listening to this. I don't know if she knows
Chef
this or
Wolf,
not.
Yeah, let us know.
And then another funny instance, and I'm sure you've had funny ones. Pisces was a restaurant on the top floor of one of the hotels downtown. Could have been Hyatt. I'm trying to remember where it was. And the chef came out, and he got on his knees, and he leaned on the table to talk to us. And he starts complaining about a review that the Sun Papers had done. Little did he know, I'm sitting there with the reviewer for Baltimore Magazine, and I'm going, like, trying to get him to get up, move. This is not the wisest thing. But Cynthia, with all tact, did not refer to this whatsoever. It was curious to see how she did this.
Yeah. Well, the whole disguise thing, I mean, when I took this job, I thought, am I supposed to wear a disguise? And there are a number of restaurateurs in town who, sadly, don't like me very much because they don't make the list. One or two in particular who will call me and really yell at me, which I am not paid to do. I'm very professional about the whole process. I'm transparent. I don't know if this it probably is unusual in that I will share my notes, not physically, but if somebody wants to have a conversation, the better restaurants are the people that want to learn, and I let them know
it's a
snapshot of a year. You should know that your menus were stained, that your steaks were overcooked, or whatever the case, that your hostess was rude. They thank me, but so there are a few places where I just don't go. I will send somebody when we review. I still keep them on my list, and we still consider them. If they end up on the list, that's great. I trust the people that I send, but I don't wear a disguise. It's a small city. It's a little uncomfortable in a way because I wear many hats. So I am a food critic, but I'm also in the kitchens getting those great stories that I just talked about. So, Dara, I just, had a great, meal in your restaurant, or I didn't. Let's say I didn't, and I wrote about it, and then I'm in disguise, and then I'm going to go in your kitchen and interview you. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It's a different era, and but I remember those days. We have quite an audience. Hi, John Hauser the third, William Sample, Arlene Finkelstein. Gee.
I feel like I might know some of these people.
Okay.
We can play Jewish geography.
Yeah, you're pulling a great audience. Well, you don't know Jeff, Lauren Eskoff, who is with Jay Moore, and John Colson. Both are very thrilled to have our friends from Baltimore Magazine in the house.
Thank you. Thanks for listening or watching.
William Sample, Randy Lerman, Jeffrey, Matt Robicelli.
Oh, hi, Matt. Hi to Allison and Matt.
All right. So I was just saw John the other night. I usually do a little segment, Where'd I Eat This Week?
That's fun.
And went over I was invited to the Boiler Room. They were kicking off a little media dinner with some of the local writers,
Mm-hmm.
Kathy Minks Eats and John Hauser, who has his podcast. And so I like to talk about my favorite bite there is they're doing a really thin, crispy pizza that had fig. It had charcuteries like spicy deli meats and blue cheese.
Any balsamic? Feels like
I don't remember.
Balsamic.
I don't know if it had balsamic on it. It was... I could eat it right now. It was so good.
You had me at flatbread or pizza? It sounds more like a flatbread.
Probably more. They're calling it pizza, but I'm trying to think how it came out.
Yeah.
So
sounds
more
delicious.
Flatbread, free form. Why don't we call it free form?
I'm married to someone who decided to be gluten-free for no good reason, and with all due respect to anyone, I understand people have dietary restrictions, but my husband is just doing it, and I love carbs. So when I go out for pizza, I don't invite him, especially when I'm reviewing. I say, you're the wrong dining companion. You're not coming with me, because he'll get the gluten-free pizza if it exists.
Well, I'm storing up the house. We're going to come around to the subject that we said that we were going to discuss because it is the elephant in the room and it's on everyone's mind. The coronavirus, how it's affecting everything, but obviously our viewpoint is dining. We said to Susan from Citron, who they just sent out an email. They're calling it a staycation. If you're going to be home and eating, they will supply. You can go online or call in and have an order prepared for you and come by for it, so you can get one of these luxury meals.
To go.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great idea.
And
I have taken out there before. It's right in my neighborhood prior to this, but yeah, no, that's terrific.
And also I sort of kept my eye out and have been looking as to what's going on. And yesterday there wasn't much, but Sarah Symington from Blue Moon and Blue Moon 2 said she's taken all the condiments off the table. Of course, everybody
They're
is
smart.
Increasing what is already their standards of keeping the place clean and healthy. So the condiments are off the table and coming out in packets or pre-portioned in to-go packets so you can have access to it. And I was speaking to someone here, like Giant Food. All the supermarkets have closed down their salad bars.
Yes, I had that thought the other day as I dipped into the Whole Foods salad bar. Yeah, that's smart. I don't think we can be cautious enough. I think that what Citron's doing is really terrific. It's a great idea. I hope other restaurants are taking note and following suit. Hopefully cleanliness is always at the forefront of what restaurants do. Maybe it's just, a good reminder. I think it's still safe to eat in a restaurant. I don't work for the World Health Organization, but I'd like to think that it's still safe. I think this idea of, washing your hands before a meal is a great one. We should all be doing it anyway, wiping down surfaces. And I think we can't, luckily warm weather's coming. We'll have opportunities to eat outside.
That's a good point.
So I hope that, people aren't so reactionary that they're not eating out. Businesses are hurting enough, especially the ones downtown. People really need your patronage. But I guess we'll see.
We all have to do what we feel is comfortable.
It's totally personal.
And it's just be conscious. Like, I have allergies, so you see in my hand is a tissue. I don't leave that anywhere. That goes with me. It's not left on the table. And I've seen people use napkins, and they put it there. Be conscious of your servers, what you're leaving. Who was it? Somebody said something that their tables... It was spacious, that their tables weren't on top of each other.
Yeah.
So they're giving a little bit more space. Do what you feel is best for you. Try to support all your local businesses. This is going to be a tough road for everyone in many, many ways.
Yeah, and as Susan points out, I have been thinking about this idea of staycations because people are pretty much everyone I know is canceling a trip, even if it's just to New York City, whether it's something international, a domestic flight, or just a road trip. We're all going to be hanging out a lot more, so I think it's smart of restaurants to do something with that, and maybe people will be looking to just entertain themselves at home. And
right. Well, if you're at home, I'm here every Thursday at 12:30. So tune in, and you do a podcast at Baltimore Magazine. So when does that?
It's on. It's not live, but it's released every Monday, usually in the morning. Yeah, we record on Thursdays and Fridays.
And Lauren does such a good job.
She does. Yeah.
I like her personality that comes across.
Very upbeat.
Very upbeat. Unfortunately, like Glenn and I were supposed to be judges at the Taste, Sante's, the Taste of Baltimore, and that got postponed.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be tonight, and that's what you're seeing. So people, maybe we're going to sit here and talk about foods to prepare at home. I definitely have a full freezer. If you get hungry, I have plenty of food. Just come wrapped in plastic wrap, and you can come in the house.
I do as well. I was just bragging last night that I have homemade biscotti that I made. I have my dal that I froze. I don't know if it's freezable, but we'll see. I have an Ina Garten winter Provençal soup that I also froze. I just keep making extra batches of things. Hopefully we won't have a power outage. And my last quart of tomato sauce from last summer.
Oh.
I know.
Well, mine, I always buy at the holidays. Prime rib goes on sale, and that was, a lot of my friends know, that was my dinner party. I would do a prime rib. I would invite them and saying, I'm fixing prime rib. And I would just rotate the guests. It was the same menu.
Fun.
But
That's
rotate
fun.
the guests.
Yeah.
So I have 2 in the freezer. I have a turkey breast. I have shrimp. I have scallops. So I really had to go in and fill in on the vegetables and things of that nature. I think we're going to sort of wrap for today. Let's not forget that you can find Jane at BaltimoreMagazine.com. You can follow her on social media, Charm City Jane. And as always, this show will be on J More Living's Facebook page, up for perpetuity, on jmoreliving.com's page, and the YouTube channel. You can always find me. I know I've never talked about my social media, so you can find me at Dara Cooks. You can contact me here if you care to sponsor the show or just have any questions at food@jmoreliving.com. We always appreciate you watching and tuning in and sending in your questions. Before I leave, let's see. William Sample says, always happy to eat out. Please make sure that you take care of your service staff in these times. Many of them are going to lose a lot of income during this epidemic.
Yeah, that's a
True
good
that.
point.
True that. A lot of people. So as I was wrapping up, you'll find me here every Thursday at 12:30. May your plates always remain full, and wash your hands.